Linda, great to have you. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I have here with me a paper that you wrote not so long ago on comprehensive sexuality education. Very interesting paper, I must say. Very interesting review paper, I must emphasize, seeing the amount of work that went into it. I actually want to know, because we've got restricted time, maybe as an icebreaker to the conversation, what comprehensive sexuality education really is.
Okay. So comprehensive sexuality education is a very broad curriculum, a very lifelong curriculum. So it encompasses learning about, basic sexual anatomy, reproductive health, gender. It's a very wide themes within the curriculum. So things like consent, age of consent, power in relationships, communication in relationships, sexual health, sexual dysfunction, how people can communicate healthily in relationships, intimate relationships, non-intimate relationships. So it's a very broad curriculum which encompasses anything you can think of. So the emphasis is on comprehensiveness. The curriculum has to be comprehensive enough to address any aspect of gender and sexuality, for example, things such as, how do I prepare myself for my first sexual encounter, for example, way to
Mm.
the to adults as well. So anybody who needs any information about sexuality, whether you are 12 years old, whether you are 65 years old, you will be catered for in comprehensive sexuality education because our sexual needs and our sexual health changes as we adjust to different aspects of our lives. So if you have a disability, for example, at the age of 40 and you have sexual dysfunction in certain parts of your body or just your behavior, the way that you were used to your body in a sexual manner, that's kind of the themes as well, which we cover in comprehensive sexuality education.
But why look at it from a school level? And when you look at it from a school level, is it senior phase, intermediate phase, or foundation phase? Why is it even important for us to look at this from a school level?
Okay. So the one aspect I wanted to answer is that it's not just so even as we grow up, we are sexual beings. There's studies which say that even in utero or even as a baby, as an infant, we explore, we discover our sexuality. So children start touching themselves in public spaces, for example, or when they think nobody's looking at them, and then a parent now has to enter and have a conversation, or even when a child is molested sexually, there has to be a conversation that this is your body. Nobody is allowed to touch your body, for example. That's sexuality education at a very early childhood phase. So it starts from there when a boy starts questioning, am I a boy? Am I a girl? Am I both? Am I attracted to this or that gender or non-gender? So it's broad. It starts so that's why it's important at a school level to build that foundation of sexuality and differences in our sexuality. So it's important to address at a school level because that's where, and the other aspect is that parental involvement isn't so big. Parents put the responsibility at the school and really do not have conversations with their children because of their own discomfort, their own cultural beliefs and religious beliefs, because sexuality conversations are very taboo in certain communities, and adults and a child have to have a very separate, very top-down sort of relationship. So it's very important at a school level, at a very early childhood school level. So even in South Africa, the CSC curriculum starts in grade 4, I believe, and goes all the way to grade 12, which is matric.
Okay. How far do we take this education? Do we use sex toys when we when we have these conversations in the classroom? Because I remember a couple of years ago when it became a thing that we are introducing CSE to schools. People were worried that people are going to rock up, teachers particularly, are going to rock up with sex toys in the classroom. So I want to know how far do we take it? How far do teachers take it?
Okay. So I specifically work with sexuality education for the visually impaired. So in the UK and in the States, the movement has been to use, it's called anatomically correct models. And these models are essentially useful because they enable the learner who's visually impaired. So someone who's visually impaired cannot see, they've never had the opportunities to see what is a breast, what is a penis, what is an erect penis, what is a flaccid penis, for example, what is a vagina. So for them, they need to, the most basic modem is to feel and touch. That's when there's meaningful connection in their minds that this is what you say it is. So it becomes much more demonstrative, much more practical. So in the space that I'm in, there's a lot of growth and a lot of movement to push for anatomically correct models. In fact, in the UK and in the US, teachers who are going into special needs education are trained to use these anatomically correct models. And of course, this is not, they have to also be age appropriate. So, for example, the work that I'm also doing is to train teachers from grade 12, from grade 10 to grade 12, because we know that sexual debut starts amongst South Africans from the
Yeah.
age of 16 and above. So this is not just going to be done with grade fours or someone who's 12, although there is a need for education, but the introduction of anatomically correct models. So the emphasis on anatomically correct is that, for example, there was a study that found that a blind boy, could explain what sexual intercourse is, but thought that, for example, the vagina is underneath the breast, for example. So there's inaccurate information that needs to be addressed, and the anatomically correct models fulfill that role to make sure the clarity is there, to make sure that they can feel and touch it, that it's given to an age-appropriate learner. Then of course there's conversations with parents and the school governing body that this is going to be taking place. So this is not something which teachers just do out of the blue. It's a discussion, it's training on the teachers, it's discussions with the parents and bringing them into what the school is planning to do. Yes, I think that's a little bit all around the anatomically correct models.
And is there a reason why you have this keen interest on the visually impaired students?
Mm.
Learners, sorry.
Learners. Well, actually, my research goes from early childhood to the teenage years to adulthood and beyond. Because I've always had an interest in sexuality and evil. In fact, we call the field sexuality and evil, and all the sexual minorities, because they are often silenced, they're often stripped off of any sexual characteristics. We tend to think of people with disability as non-sexual being, not interested in sexuality, as infertile, as unfit to parent, as just the outcast of society. So someone needs to make them not invisible, to take out the silence, the taboo, the mysticism, the false misconceptions that we have about people with disabilities and their bodies and their sexual needs. So that's where the interest comes from.
You also talk about in the paper, I want to quote this, and I'm going to read it as it is written. In addition, Part 3 of Chapter 7 in the Children's Act also states that a child may consent to medical services, such as being prescribed contraceptives and having a pregnancy terminated as early as 12 years of age, given their maturity and understanding of the associated risks of these treatments and procedures. What do you make of this statement?
So there is the law, which is the Children's Act, and the Children's Act also tries to put provisions for children to also consent. Like I said, there's a lot of disjunction, or parents seem to feel as if they should take the responsibility to educate their children about sexuality, to consent to certain aspects about their children's sexual lives, sexual practices. And at times, it certain conflicts with basic human rights. So we all have certain rights which are recognized by the Constitution of South Africa. And legislature such as the Children's Act also tries to obtain or uphold what is rightfully basic human rights in the Constitution of South Africa. So the Children Act provides that provision for a child who does have maturity to consent by the age of 12. Because as I said, knowing what the cases of rape in South Africa, knowing that children are abused on a regular basis, the state provides provision for children to consent at the age of 12 to these medical practices, such as terminating a pregnancy. And you don't even have to consult, you don't have to get the consent of your parents, because sometimes your parents might even conflict religiously with what you're trying to do. But it is your basic human right, which is the most which is basically what we all need to uphold to doctors, nurses, parents. So you are given the right to consent to that practice, despite your parents' attitudes, religious beliefs, morals. The state gives you that choice with, of course, the maturity. So it's quite. I like the maturity aspect, that we also need to think of the child that presents at this clinic. So if you are a medical professional, you also need to take a little bit of steps to ensure that this person is able to consent and is not forced.
But then my question then would be, how do we know that a 12-year-old is mature enough to go through such, to terminate, common term, to abort a child? How do we get to that level? Because as I understand, there are no counseling services when our 12-year-olds, I'm going to stick to age 12, when they go for these services, whether in clinics or in the back rooms, wherever. So how do you then know that they are mature enough and strong enough to actually go through these procedures?
I'm gonna correct you there. There are centers, there are abortion centers and clinics which nurses and doctors are actually trained to offer some basic counseling, some basic briefing of, first of all, there's a check-in. How old are you? Who do you live with? But of course, there's a very different relationship that goes on there, or encounter that goes on there. People can lie and so on, but there is some basic understanding that do you know what you're doing? Do you know what you're consenting to? And do you know the after effects of what you're consenting to? So health professionals are trained, and according to this law, should carry some basic understanding of what is consent and do you know what you're consenting to?
So this research paper, having read it, it doesn't go as far as addressing the question that I'm going to ask now, but I just want to know your thinking. How do you think, in fact, let me give a bit of context. Suppose a 12-year-old is asked the questions you just asked now, and they say, yes, I know the implications of what I'm doing. But truth of the matter is, many of them might not necessarily know what it is that stands for them after that procedure. So now I want to know from you, how do you think that affects the girl child, the 12-year-old psychologically? Because I've seen with some people, they become zombies even after, even when they are above the age of 20. So how much more a 12-year-old? How do you think that affects them?
Sure. Yeah, I want to also break it down to every child is different, and
Yeah.
every child has a certain level of maturity at the age of 16, at the age of 10, at the age of 9. It's also about even the idea of, or even the notion of menstruation. It can happen to a 9-year-old, meaning that now they can actually have the potential to deliver a child. So it's very different, and that's why the education, in the best case scenario, let me just also put it like that, in the best case scenario, the education is supposed to be there. The healthcare professional is supposed to guide the child with much more concrete information. And of course, as you keep on pointing out, that not every 12-year-old will have the maturity to understand the full implication of a pregnancy. And remember, children can also die during pregnancy, not just children, but throughout. But in the best case scenario, this education is supposed to take place in a very comprehensive manner, in a very safe, in a very non-judgmental, in a very I almost say when I use the word educational manner. And in the base case scenario, also healthcare professionals are supposed to do what they're supposed to do. And if a parent needs to be involved or someone else needs to be involved, like a psychologist, for example, or a social worker, then that's another matter as well. But we can never really ensure that a 12-year-old fully understands or has the maturity to fully understand and comprehend. But the act itself is a very important one, because the implications of a pregnancy are far beyond. Some people are raped, some people are, it's very different circumstances for everyone. And in the base case scenario, the act is provided so that someone can make a fully informed decision about their
Uh,
body.
are you in support of the termination of pregnancies as an individual, not as a researcher, as Lindo?
Hmm. Well, I would say that I believe in individual choice, and also the individual choice is framed by very different circumstances. It's framed by different values. And if the individual is fully informed, the individual is fully aware, the individual has the maturity to comprehend the implications of a pregnancy, and if they want to abort or if they want to keep the child, then it's something which should be supported with the above in mind.
Maybe the question shouldn't even be that. Maybe the question should be, should a 12-year-old be allowed to fall pregnant voluntarily? It's understandable if involuntary. For instance, if a 12-year-old is raped, there's nothing they can do there. But if a 12-year-old does things voluntary, then it's a different case altogether. Should it be legalized? Should it not be at least 16, 17, or 18? What do you think?
So, like I said, it's a very complex issue. So there are communities, for example, which believe that a child who is 12 is ready for marriage. There's child brides in India. There's people who, yeah, at 9-year-old, you're married to some 50-year-old or 60-year-old. And it's a practice. It's a common practice in certain parts of the world. These are generational practices. Things like genital mutilation on women and girls. It's practices which happen for centuries. They've been happening in the African continent, in the subcontinent of India. And because a child is socially constructed in a very different manner than they would be, for example, in the UK and the US, where someone who's 12 years old is seen as someone who is emotional, throwing tantrums, while in certain spaces in Africa, for example, or in India, for example, someone who's 12 years old is already a woman. It's socially constructed as a woman. So there's no innocence in this framing of what a child is or a 12-year-old is. It's not this person who, should be allowed, we should be tiptoeing around her because he or she is exploring themselves. This is a woman who is now ready for marriage, and should be married at that age. So, when you take all of these perspectives into mind, culturally, socially, it's like I said, it's a very social construction of what a child is, and the innocence of children as well comes into play, because we tend to think of children as non-sexual beings, as people who they don't have any sexual agency, but children are also sexual beings. They experience sexual pleasure, they experience sexual desire, and therefore we need to then have this conversation with all of that social, cultural, medical discourses, and also legal discourses of what we define as a child, and the limits and almost these discourses about a child is innocent or should be prevented from exploring their sexuality, because children are very sexually active. Some children are sexually active in certain parts of the world and are seen as the sexual debut is even lesser, you know.
I wonder though, as a researcher, from a researcher's seat, I wonder if our questions should be framed around, yes, this is happening, let us investigate it within the current practices. Or if it should be, okay, so I was saying, Lindo, I wonder if as researchers, our questions should be framed around what is currently happening. Yes, 12-year-olds are falling pregnant in some cultures, in some countries even. They get married from an early age, you said 9 years, 12 years. Should we even accept that? Should we not point out should we not point out other factors that come into play? Because it restricts the development of a girl child, I would imagine. I could be wrong. Um, I wonder, because you are already close to having such conversations through your research, if that's not something you think should be considered.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. I was just thinking about the cases in Limpopo, the alarming pregnancies in Limpopo, where there are social cultural issues there. There's high rates of poverty, and you find I heard of a story where the pastor was sleeping with this young girl, and the mother knew because they were getting some sort of monetary um, support from this pastor. So this pastor was basically a blesser, and you know, so the society knows that this is happening. Uh, so now it's an issue of, because this is happening, but for certain specific reasons, this family is benefiting through this child. Uh, so this child is almost, sorry to use the term, but pimped by the family to support
Yeah.
what is happening. And for us to say, should it not be condoned or not, it becomes very difficult as a researcher, because when you do encounter those sort of incidences, you need to be you need to now be culturally sensitive or culturally considerate, because now if you now report this pastor, the conversation around the community is that, or in fact, maybe let me put it like this: why isn't the community itself doing something about this pastor, for example? The parents know, the village knows what is happening. So you, as a researcher, come into the space and you upset the interactions, the daily interactions. Everybody is fully aware of what is happening. So now you, as a researcher, come into the space and you are now upsetting how a community is able to sustain itself. So you report the pastor, you take out the livelihood of people who depend on this pastor. And are you going to do something about that? Are you now going to be the provider, the breadwinner, which was this pastor? Are you now going to take on the role? Because the pastor served a particular role in that space. So these are very ethical researcher and cultural questions, cultural sensitivity questions that us as researchers need to then do. So now it would then mean that we would have to now address the parents, address the pastor, address the child, who are so interlinked and have different roles in the space, in this conversation, in the situation, because there are different elements to tackle here. It's not just arresting the pastor, because now you are upsetting the way things are done in that village. They are socially acceptable, culturally acceptable means of daily living, of interaction, of who's the power, who holds the power. So
Lindo, I don't know. I think I'm of a different view there. I believe that our one of our roles as researchers is to be accountable with causing discomfort. Um, with respect to the work that we do. For instance, if I do research on indigenous foods, it's known that we mainly rely on food from the West, your GMOs, your exotic foods, etc., etc. But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't be comfortable enough to talk about indigenous foods and advocate for indigenous foods and speak against GMOs because they've got health hazards associated with them. Coming back to the example that you just made, you raise your concerns about the pasta, and I don't think it's against ethics, actually, because you would be saving the family and the child. What is likely to happen there is that social service, what do you call them, social development, the social development department could intervene. Other wings of government and non-government could also intervene there. But what you would have done is to actually save the poor child. Don't you think so? Wouldn't you agree with me there?
Mm. Yeah. I fully agree with you. I was just lending another perspective of how this issue is not as easy as we sometimes make it out to be. Then, because now as researchers, we need to be also um, very cognizant of what our participants go through on a daily basis. You know, we can go to our own individual homes, which are very nice and so on, and also we could be whistleblowers. We could be agents of change. I fully strongly believe on social justice. I truly my work is built on social justice and transformation, meaningful transformation. But I was trying to also highlight some of the aspects that, as researchers, we then need to also be sensitive to. We need to highlight these issues because a problem also becomes cemented in a community which they don't see as a problem. You come in with your ideas and you also leave at the end of the day, and you leave a situation which for so many people it benefits them. For so many people it's been the status quo, and also they do not understand the issues that we're trying to raise, you know. But of course, like I said, I strongly believe in social justice and real transformation. I think I was just trying to also give you another lens to some of these issues, that they're not so black and white. There's
Yeah.
many gray areas here, and as a researcher, like you said, you need to learn to be comfortable with the uncomfortableness, because that's when you start to be provoked and enact a meaningful change, because then you address what bothers people on a daily basis, but they're not aware of, you know. And once you create that uncomfortableness, everybody else becomes uncomfortable, and the consequences of that and the implications of that are quite what's the word? The ramifications are far long than when you leave as a researcher. So it's just widening the issue and the discussion, I guess.
I think it's one of those ethics slash morality questions. It's not something we can really say we can get away with. If it's a picture of ethics, then morally, depending on your values, can't you do what needs to be done as an individual and rope in other parties? But also, we are guided by ethics, as you correctly say, which
Mm.
makes me wonder, though, as you say all these things, if ethics doesn't restrict researchers when you look at it from a social justice perspective, and using this example as a case.
Yes. What's the question?
So I'm asking if you don't think that ethics is somewhat restricting researchers in bringing about change in such instances.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Um, the ethics part is you can plan the study as much as you can, and especially if so most researchers sometimes do not go into the field before um, they do not go into the field before applying for the ethics. So you, in your mind as a researcher, and especially the many early researchers or emerging researchers, they have that issue at the beginning of their careers where it's this imagined world that you want to go into the field and you're going to collect this data, you're going to make a meaningful change, you really want to abide by every ethical rule that you can think of, but once you go into that space, things such as your race, things such as your gender, your sexuality come into play because it's shaped by your own perspective, your own worldviews, your own upbringing comes into play. And so ethics as a restriction, um, so you can only do what is ethical in that point. The rest, sometimes some of the issues are not up to you to address. They're never going to be addressed by you because it's a microcosm, and it's situations, it's issues which are far beyond us sometimes. So ethics can only lead us to not do any harm, if that makes any sense. We can only
Yeah.
do our ethically, but there are other issues which present themselves, especially now when we explore things on a social level, on a cultural basis, where now I remember reading, for example, this paper where these two gay men were saying that they are homeless gay prostitutes, and they were saying that they prefer to have HIV so that they are not worried anymore about getting it.
Mm.
you know so you as a researcher now are faced with very complex issues there. Do you educate? Do you now what do you do? And remember, now it's their life, it's the way they depend on making a living. They need to
Mm.
have unprotected sex with these minors, with these truck drivers, with the taxi drivers, um and they get more money through having unprotected sex. So for them, having the HIV eliminates the preoccupation with my health, my this, my that, and also the daily cost of living. I need to make this money. So the HIV is just another barrier in my mind. I can't fully make more money. So my point here is that you can only do what is good. So as long as, I guess, you're not harming anyone, and that's that in ethical confines, then you should be okay. But now there's another aspect of what could you have done, and those are other issues, I guess, outside of ethics, I guess, that you can then reflexively reflect on and see what is it that you're contributing, or what is it that you could have done, or what is it that you've learned about that situation for other people who might have a very well-standing position, or someone who has left that society, has left that community or sex work, for example, and can be even more meaningful and helpful to make changes in that space.
Mm. Wow. Okay. No, thanks, Lindo. Uh, it, Again, you just brought in the LGBTQ community, and I want to bring it into the theme of this conversation. In as far as comprehensive sexuality or sexual education is concerned, uh, how intrusive is it if you look at this from a LGBT angle?
Yes, gender and sexuality diversity are very key components in the CSE curriculum. There's a body of knowledge in South Africa that's doing really well. You have your Dennis Francis, your Anthony Brown, your Emmanuel Maeza, your Thabo Msibi, your Devi Abana, and I can go on, and a little bit of my work also there. It's quite a growing field, and of course, there's very nuances that we haven't highlighted. So I know, for example, my mentor, Prof. Anthony Brown, is looking at intersex bodies in South Africa because it's quite a silenced community or body of research in the LGBT community, because the I is very, very silent. we do not know much about the intersexed bodies and the experiences of growing up as not having, for example, any genitalia or having both genitalia.
What
What
is
is
that?
it like?
The
Excuse me?
inter the inter what?
Intersexed. Intersexed.
Okay, please explain that.
Okay. So intersex basically means that you are born with either both male and female genitalia, so a penis and a vagina. Some of them are operational, some of them are not fully grown. Some people are born with male testicles, but they have a vagina, for example. So the testicles are inside, for example, the vagina. Um, so and also these kinds of variations, there's about over 33 variations of intersex bodies. So you could be born female but produce high levels of male testosterone, and it changes your voice, it changes your ability to have children, for example. So and some people are not even born with genitalia. Some people remove their parents remove their genitalia, the male and female genitalia, and choose that we want a boy or we want a girl. And of course, those kinds of decisions have implications when the child becomes a teenager and they identify with the opposite sex, the opposite gender that their parents assigned them at birth, or a doctor assigned them at birth. Because remember now, the genitalia that was male or female was removed without even their knowledge. And I mean, just growing up with those hormonal, bodily, personality alterations has far more implications in adulthood. And as a child, if you still have, for example, both, and I mean, we all know what it's like growing up and going to school and being different. So yeah, it's quite, there's very different fields that we haven't tapped into.
Hmm. I want to go back to your article. You present here the discourses that are in opposition to the rollout of this form of education in basic education. And there's this one, I'm going to read it verbatim. And these, I think, are taken from newspapers and they were interacting with people at a ground level. So it says, while many teachers are of the highest caliber, there are problems, including sexual abuse, absenteeism, and alcohol consumption. So the question arises, are SA teachers in general capable of implementing cutting edge sex education? That's a question of
uh,
maybe,
as for
maybe, maybe if I were to couple that with another quote, which speaks to parents' right to choose. A parent said this: sex education at schools is poorly handled by ill-equipped people. Guidance counselors are non-existent, which is something that I spoke about earlier when we spoke about abortion. Corporal punishment has been abolished. Extramural activities are rare. What do you make of these two statements?
Hmm. Um, yeah, it's the basic pointing of a finger. Parents saying that teachers are not doing enough. Teachers saying parents are not doing anything at all. It's been a very ongoing debate, and remember that we live in a country where it's very multicultural, very multi-religious, very um we struggle to agree on anything, probably. Um, and specifically with these very controversial issues. Uh,
Yeah.
like I said, the construction of a child and the innocence of a child, that children are not sexual. Why give them any sexuality education? Because we are corrupting or we are sexualizing them. Those are some of the beliefs, for example. So, and also to also state this, that teachers are also people. Teachers come from their own communities where you, for example, like Xhosa man, you're Christian, you're a hardcore Christian, or you're Muslim, and homosexuality is taboo in your culture. And you as a teacher now are given a curriculum where you have to talk about anal sex, homosexuality, bisexuality, um, you know, So it's not an easy or straightforward situation for teachers to also deal with, but teachers are trained, and the curriculum is saying that this is a subject that's being rolled out, and I guess for the on the teacher side, they need to be trained. They really need the education. Some teachers have gotten the education 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and this curriculum, which has been in progress for the longest of time, and different things are being built onto it because we are also trying to match the needs of young people in South Africa, because the amount of social media, the amount of the changes which are happening from someone who got educated 20 years ago as a teacher, and their values and their value system is quite different from what it is now. Right now, children can go on the internet and see exactly what they want to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Uh, go right
teachers have
ahead.
to teachers have to grapple with their own cultural, religious beliefs, as well as the parents. So it's a very interesting dynamic, because teachers also feel overwhelmed, teachers feel uncomfortable, teachers feel unprepared, teachers feel they can't relate, they can't teach out of that discomfort. While parents as well are also feeling the same thing. As much as they want to take the education onto their own hands, we know from research that parents are not doing that. And now, if nobody's trying to educate these young people, it's that old saying that when two elephants fight or disagree, the grass is the one which usually suffers, which is our learners. The learners do not get prepared for the world that we live in, where pornography, where different influences are happening on a daily basis. They are confronted with all kinds of issues that the parents do not are not even aware of. So, and it's also to also add here that these learners are fully aware. So they're fully aware of what homosexuality is. They are fully aware of, like I said, the age of sexual debut is 16 years old, but we know that children are having sex at even a younger age. We know that there's a rape culture. We know that there's GBV. We know that there is blessers which are, out there in different ways, and they present in different situations. So yes,
Wow. You're making me think. You've just taken me back to my grade 7 and grade 9 LO classes. One of my teachers, in fact, my LO teacher in grade 7, uh, whenever she had to teach about sexuality, I remember she would speak ill against it was LGB at the time. They went all these other letters, and she's a staunch Christian, and she would make sure that she preaches against homosexuality or same-sex intimacy. And then in grade 9, I remember my LO teacher. She wasn't even my was she LO teacher. I remember she taught us technology at the time. She walked in and said, yes, it's okay to be these things according to the law, but if at any point in life I bump into you at a mall and you tell me that you're gay, I see that you're gay, don't even dare come close to me. Uh,
mm,
Pause off, and then she stated her reasons.
mm,
So we deal with such people who stand in front of us and our children, uh, teaching us that we should not accept who we are or who our children are. And
mm,
I think that's one of the problems that still need to be looked at, especially as it concerns sexual education at a basic level. I want to quote again something from your paper. Where is it? There's a part that says, according to the policy, the aim of CSE is to equip learners with appropriate knowledge and skills to enable them to make mindful and healthy choices about relationships and the expression of their sexuality. And so as I was reading this, I remember I underlined, I underlined and made a note. And I said, can't we argue that the inverse is true? Not knowing that I would later find a quote again from, I think it's somewhere here. Yes. So it's on the protection of the innocence of young children. And it reads, government promoted what they refer to as comprehensive sexuality education, which taught children and young people they had to be sexual to be normal. Do you or do you not agree with this statement? Because when I read that part where you spoke about the policy, this is the exact same question that came to my mind. Sex is legalized. It's free pizza for everyone.
Mm. Okay. Can you maybe just repeat the question? I just want to make sure that I fully understand what you're asking here.
Okay. I'll start with the quote again. So
Okay.
this is
Just wait. I just need to quickly
yeah.
dash. Yeah, I'll just be back just now.
So the question for me is Linda Yates of the ADCP party said, government promoted what they referred to as comprehensive sexuality education, which taught children and young people that they had to be sexual to be normal. So the question here is, what do you make of this statement? Does this what do you refer to it, CSE, encourage children to be sexual beings because it's now legalized? It's free pizza for everyone.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. So that was a quote from some parent regarding the rollout of CSE. So this is another issue that we, and by me, I mean by we, I mean the scholarship in South Africa. Speaking about your Dennis Francis, your Anthony Brown, and Adivia Bana, and them, that this is the attitude that parents have about CSE, is that there's such a huge pushback because of like I said, it's very much, sometimes not even informed by rightful information. Sometimes parents just see this as the way that we are sexualizing their kids, encouraging them to be sexually active, corrupting their sexual innocence. And to that, it's worth noting that a lot of parents do not have the conversations that their kids are actually having in class, in with their friends, and in connection with what they see on social media. So I don't even think that teachers would want to encourage sexuality. I mean, it doesn't even make sense that you are trying to make young people sexually active or to be sexual, to be normal. I don't even think it makes sense, because if you as an adult know the implications of having unprotected sex, someone who goes into their first sexual encounter unaware, unprepared, I don't think anybody would encourage that, or sexualize or make being sexually active a normal thing. I think what the CSE work is trying to do is to say that children are sexually, some children are sexually active at a young age, whether they are doing it voluntarily or they are coerced into it by a boyfriend, by a parent, by a neighbor, by a teacher. It could be anything, or anyone, anywhere, in different situations. But parents also, we found out that speaking to young people about sexuality and their sexual needs, they're not having those conversations with their parents because, like I said, their parents are either too religious, too judgmental, not they don't provide a very trusting environment for them to share that I am gay, or I am trans. And those are very hard conversations for the parents that we have today. Not all parents are liberal or supportive or affirming. Not even all teachers are that. So the CSE work is providing an avenue for young people to be comfortable, to have those conversations about anal sex, about bisexuality, about polyamorous relationships, because young people are seeing this on TV, on social media, I mean, I know of a trans learner, a trans girl who got admitted to an only girls school. A trans learner who got admitted to an only girls school. It's happening. There was a school in Cape Town, an only girls school, which accepted or admitted a trans girl into their school. So those are issues which are happening. They are so young people are dying to have those conversations, but they can't have them with their parents. And also, if their parents are not involved in what's going on, they will obviously make a judgment which is sometimes not informed. And we are just trying to provide a vehicle that young people can utilize to explore what is going on in their lives. I don't think we are actively encouraging people to be sexual to be normal. That I don't even think that makes sense because if especially if you work in the space, you know how if young people make very bad decisions, how it can adversely affect their entire lives, you know, not just their health, but their mental health, to go back to what we were talking about. And we know there's so many high rates of suicide amongst young people because their mental health is not addressed at home specifically, and they need to talk about the issues which are happening in their everyday lives. So I don't think CSA should be seen as a harmful tool. We are not out there trying to recruit homosexuals or recruit sexually active people to be cool. I don't think that's the conversation that is happening. And if parents were also fully engaged in the curriculum and its intentions, I think possibly or hopefully there would be a much more awareness, a much more conscientiousness of what is happening, because we do want parents to also contribute to this curriculum and say that, you know, I don't know what to do if my child tells me that he or she is trans or he or she is bisexual. And sometimes those experiences for young people, they happen and they can't talk about them, and it's so unfortunate that they sometimes have very uncomfortable or um, very harmful experiences of consenting to things that they think they can handle, but they can't. You know, having two boyfriends, you know, having the thrill of having sex with two guys in a night and not having anybody to talk to about that, about the risks, the other alternatives which can happen, you know, about rape, about um um your 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 sexual identity or sexual orientation. It's a very lonely thing for young people. So CSE provides the body of knowledge, provides spaces, provides opportunities for young people to learn, not just about knowledge or literacy, but about their own beliefs, their own attitudes, their own identities as growing human beings.
Hmm. Interesting you should say all these things. Again, now you've taken me to grade 12. My English teacher, I love him. I love him very much. A Swati man who was stationed in my hometown at the time. So whenever we had conversations, you know, there was always those problematic gents sitting at the back. So his thing would be like, and then he would say the word. And then it would be like, it's why yakubulala mfana wami. Sana number 3, number 4, we do, we keep it why, you know? I think for me, the reason why the likes of Linda, who's a parent, say such statements is because in her mind, what CSE does is to create loopholes. You find, like you said, teachers are also human beings. They can go wild, they can go off track if the policy sort of like accommodates them. That is why you hear such statements. Also, the same teacher that I referred to earlier, my grade 9 teacher, she would always say to boys, when they were shimane, you know? And umfana, if he is not isishimane, what is he expected to do with a girlfriend, with a girl? You know, so there's all those again. I wanted to ask though, seeing that you are bringing in the LGBT community into the conversation, we still need to understand the LGBT community as a society. I believe there's a lot of awareness that is being driven towards that, but we still stand in a position where there's people that are just reluctant to understand, even with teachers as well, to understand the LGBT community. And I often wonder how that affects members of the community, especially children at school. And I ask this because even within the schools themselves, they are still isolated by their peers. They would be called terms such as "Wistabane," you are this, you are that, and they would be laughed at by other boys. So psychologically, how does that impact those kids?
Yeah, it's quite the it really does. So remember that teachers are role models in that space. Other learners look up to teachers as to how should I behave? How should I, is it okay to call someone a faggot, or a dyke, or ishimani, or whatever? And if a teacher does that, so a teacher is an adult and a parent in that scenario. So if a teacher does not advocate for the affirmation, for the support, for the existence, um, the care. We talk about care in care and support in that space. Other learners learn that it's okay for me to discriminate, to victimize, to harass, to assault, to verbally, psychologically abuse someone else's identity. So there's a lot of damage done in that space, because now the school also, a school is supposed to be a safe space. It's supposed
Mm,
to be where learners learn community, belonging. Who am I? It's a very space where you are a young person learning to be who you are. And I mean, it's definitely not going to be easy. You know, we are judged differently by society to begin with, for our weight, for the way we look, for our height, for our bodies, and so on. So something as closest to identity, and sometimes that's the only space a learner can feel safe. They're already in their immediate environment, they're rejected, they are ostracized, they are told that they are different, they do not belong. So if also at school, and remember they spend so many hours at school with peers, with people who they go back to the same communities that they come from. So it becomes such a troublesome phase for them. It leads to various issues of mental health. It leads to very adverse mental health risks, such as suicide, such as self-destructive behaviors, and so much maladjustment as well in personality and behavior. Uh, so the school space, the schooling environment needs to be created as a safe, trusting, non-judgmental environment,
mm,
um, where care and support is advocated for everyone. Inclusion
mm,
should be advocated for everyone. Belonging, community support, advocacy should be the
mm,
space where young people can lead very, very fruitful and enriching lives. Because you know, if that could be the only space that
mm.
they find care, support, community, and belonging.
Linda, as you say this, you mentioned the term care. I think you've mentioned it twice now. And you are reminding me of an article that I read, I think about a month ago or 2 months ago, about a teacher that called a young boy gay in class. And this boy wrote a letter to say he's taking away his life because he was called gay by this particular male teacher. And in my mind, I'm also thinking about Dr. Tony in my institution. She always talks about the pedagogy of care. Always put
Mm,
yourself in the shoes of a student in our case. In this case, it would be of the learner. And I wonder if it wouldn't be a great thing for researchers like yourself to start teaching about the pedagogy of care in institutions, in basic education, high schools and primary schools alike. Train teachers or work together with teachers and try to change their approaches when it comes to such matters, because nobody does that. And it's one of the most important things that I think our society should have done by now, yet it hasn't happened. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's also a movement towards a school-based support team where marginalized communities or marginalized learners can be accommodated, and this is a teacher-led initiative. There's also the care and support pillars that there's a lot of work, research, and research that is gearing towards that. There's a DBE's there was a DBE initiative I remember where we're trying to now put all these pillars of care. What does care mean? What does support mean? And they have pillars. There's a support document towards that, and different provinces are even far advanced towards that. There's the Western Cape. They call it, there's like a guidelines for how to address the LGBT learner community, where, for example, things like dress code, if you identify as trans or non-binary and you want to wear dress as a boy, there's a policy in the Western Cape, there's guidelines, things like who's allowed to like gender neutral bathrooms, sports, how do LGBT communities enter and become affirmed in sports activities. So there's various policies provincially, locally, which are actually starting to take sort of that initiative towards a school-based support system where teachers and learners, school governing bodies can actually create what is care in the space for the LGBT learner community. And I think it's quite important because if at that level, if at that structural level or institutional level, once that affirmation is created, because now those people, like I said in my initial point, that they set the example for the rest of the school. If school managers, principals are saying it's okay for you to be a non-binary person, for you to also be referred to you based on your preferred pronouns, for you to feel that it's safe in this school to play the sports that you want to enter into, then it creates a very different school climate. We're moving 2 steps forward towards that, because the idea of policy is fine, but I think it's at that school level, that grassroots level, because we've got such fantastic policies in South Africa. The constitution says you cannot discriminate, but now at a local level or a national level, the constitution says this brilliant idea of non-discrimination. But now at a local level, a school's code of conduct says something different. They say we cannot admit an LGBT learner in the school. But the constitution at a national level says that it's not okay to discriminate. It's actually a constitutional infringement. But now at a school level, the school's code of conduct says otherwise. So there's a disjuncture between what is nationally recognized and also the everyday experiences of someone who goes to a particular school, say a Hindu or a Muslim school or a Catholic school. So there needs to be a greater forging of what do we want as people. But care and support is a very, very, very it's a much needed movement to the way we teach and the teachers that we want, because if they don't even understand what is care and support, it makes the concept very vague, very abstract, very non-practical. It's something that they just need to say, but they don't even know how to do.
And also, and how I look at this is if we don't create an environment that is inclusive enough for everyone, for the LGBT community in this case as well, I think what we are doing is psychologically tampering with these kids, young learners. I'm mainly concerned about young learners in this case because this is a basic education conversation. And from a mental wellness perspective, I think what society, schools as well, should be advocating for is ensuring that each and every learner is safe. We need to create safe spaces for young learners. You know, with that said, though, I would like to thank you for joining me. I think this has been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate your contributions. I've learned much. I'm not gonna lie, and it is my wish within yours that you continue doing this research and also just putting it into practice, engaging maybe at an advisory or policy level different stakeholders out there.
No, I really do appreciate the time and the invite.
Thank you.